Styles, aka Artemis Martinez from Lucha Underground, and you're watching the Work Shoot Wrestling Podcast. It's gonna be fun.
Welcome to episode 206 of the Work Shoot Wrestling Podcast. This is Corey Richmond, joined by Jason Brooks, and this week we have a special guest, one of the guys who most likely is the reason why me and Jason are doing this. The host at one point of Off the Ropes from Oswego Radio, Brian Drake is joining us at Drake Fantasy. Brian, how you doing? And are you surprised that all these years later you'd be doing wrestling and you wouldn't be hosting?
I love it. I'm so happy that you guys are still doing this. We all went to Oswego State University on the shore of Lake Ontario, way up north of New York, where it's like 4 degrees every day. And we did this little radio show about wrestling for 4 years, and it just devolved over time into basically like a bootleg Howard Stern show by our senior year. But yeah, it's awesome that you guys are still doing this, and I follow what you guys are doing on Facebook and Twitter, and I see you're doing the show still. So I'm excited to be here. I'm still a wrestling fan all these years later, and I have lots of opinions about Mania and the Performance Center and everything else in the world of wrestling. So I'm super excited you guys had me on.
Drake, we're excited to have you for sure. It's great having you on, and we're excited to chop it up and talk about wrestling a little bit with you.
And
cool, man.
And this will be the 1 hour or however long you're on with us that the name Hardhout McGee will be allowed to be uttered on the program ever. And now that I said that, it will mostly become a thing again. But
I've had to tell guys, like I'm texting guys who used to do the show with us, and I'm like, hey, I'm doing the show with Brooks, and then I was like, do you remember Corey? And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, Hardhat McGee, and they're like, oh yeah, that guy. Because we gave everybody on the show a nickname. Like my friend Don Cohane, he's a school teacher now here I live in Syracuse. And we needed a nickname for him. And I remember Corey the King Costello, who was kind of our Jerry Lawler of the show. He just kind of looks over at him and he goes, Dingo Don the Baby Eater. That's your name. He's like, what? I go, well, that's it. It stuck. So there's your name.
Yeah, I think toward the end, when I was there, the show was basically the Howard Stern show. Yeah. Like I remember one episode, I'm like, do they fucking talk about wrestling at all on this show?
No.
There's like no wrestling talk. But it was a great show.
I was pledging a fraternity my freshman year at college. And because I was also hosting this wrestling show, I told the guys, I'm like, hey, listen. And this was when wrestling was white hot. It was 97, 98, right? 98, 98, whatever that time is. So WWE was real hot. WCW was kind of coming down. But I told them, I go, listen, I can't start pledging until wrestling's. I have to watch it because I go to school for broadcasting. So I have to watch the show. And back then, there's no DVR in 1998. So they were like, all right, fine. Because they wanted to watch it too. So we watched the show, and it's like, all right, now we'll go, do everything else we have to do that we can't talk about on radio.
Yeah, it's really funny because they talked about this on Dark Side of the Ring with Russo. I mean, that was probably the last time that college kids sat down and watched Raw every single week. Like, I don't know that you really get that now, especially with DVR and things like that. It was like appointment television back then for sure.
I remember in the dorms at Oswego, people sitting in the lounges watching the show, and they're like, did you see what The Rock said? I mean, The Rock was the guy at that time for me and my friends. Stone Cold was as hot as ever. We loved it. It was just, I know Russo gets a bad rap now, but when you're a 20-year-old kid, like, I like that Sonny and Sable are out there half naked and all the crazy stuff they're doing. Like, that was cool to me. Like, now as a soon-to-be 40-year-old father of 2, I wouldn't want to watch that with my kids. But back then, it was great.
Actually, you know what? I want to bring this up. I'm going off because I always do this. How much do your kids watch wrestling at all? Or is it something that you don't feel comfortable with?
And how old are your kids anyway?
I've got a son and a daughter. They are 7 and 5. I've had it on at times, and they'll kind of watch it, but they're like, why are these people beating each other up? And like my daughter will see it, and there's women wrestling now and doing very well. She's like, why are these women hitting each other? And my wife doesn't like wrestling at all. She's like, I don't want the kids watching it. So they haven't really gotten into it. And I remember being 7, 8 years old. That was stuff to do. That was the first time I ever saw wrestling. I went to.
Same with me.
I saw Strike Force win the tag straps in a dark match
Tito Santana and Rick Martel, right?
Yes, Rick Martel, who should be in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
Why he's not.
The model. He was great.
But yeah, that was the first time I ever went and saw wrestling. It was my mom's birthday, October 27th, 1987, in the Onondaga County War Memorial. Same building, mind you, where David Arquette won the world title so many years later.
Good memories and bad memories, we could say.
We were there. We did Off the Ropes live from Thunder. Like after, and like, I got to find that tape. I have all the tapes of these shows. That's got to be just like us drunk. Like, what happened? Why are we here? But,
at some point, if you find any tapes with me on it, feel free to get rid of those as evidence for the future. But let's get into. We spoke about right after Mania. We did a show, and we had some quick takes on some stuff. But what were your thoughts of Wrestlemania? And I guess the two biggest matches that people are talking about were, I guess, as people are now saying, WWE's cinematic version of wrestling. The Firefly Funhouse and the
Boneyard Match.
Yeah. Well, I remember tweeting, and you and I actually were going back and forth that night on Twitter.
And that was actually me. That was me. Drew.
Oh, okay. And if you were the one going against my Charlotte takes, we'll get into that later. But
Yes.
so number one, they should have postponed WrestleMania. There's no reason because it's a scripted show. You can push storylines off for 6 months. Like WrestleMania is about the atmosphere, the spectacle, the stage, people coming out, their entrance. That's WrestleMania. The match is whatever, who cares? They have a billion matches every week. So you're doing it in an empty performance center. I felt bad for those performers, to be honest. Those guys are coming out, and you can kind of see it on some of their faces. They're coming out, and they're like, I'm looking around a warehouse here. Like, this sucks. This is not my dream here to be in this match. So I wish they would have pushed it off, but whatever. They had to do what they had to do. I thought the Undertaker match was way overproduced. I showed it to my wife. She thought it was cool. And then I sat and I thought about it more. And I go, well, they had to do something with the Undertaker. What was positive about it? Well, it gave him breaks because God knows how long it took him to shoot that. And it made him look good. What I didn't like is AJ Styles in his promos leading up to it is saying, I want the old Undertaker. I want, the great Undertaker of yesteryear. And you bring out the American Badass version. Like, there's no consistency there. Thought it was overproduced, but whatever. I guess it was cool. Firefly Funhouse, great. That was cool. Bray Wyatt did an amazing job. John Cena was the worst part by far of the Firefly Funhouse because he can't act. He looked horrible. He looked so out of place. And I've thought for years that Cena's kind of mailed it in with wrestling, and he kind of breaks kayfabe, and he's kind of goofy, like I'm above it now, and Mr. Cool, and it just, and the haircut, he's got my haircut. He doesn't look like he should be there. So those two matches, I thought Firefly Funhouse was cool. Thank God Wyatt went over, but I thought it was interesting. What did you guys think about, like, every prop from the warehouse was brought out, and I'm showing Bischoff and all that. He was even surprised. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so Drake, you know a little bit about how I feel because we were arguing about it on Twitter. Mm-hmm. I loved it. Cena is he's not a great actor. He's no Robert De Niro. But I thought, here's the thing with Cena. I thought he was acting like that on purpose. Like he was kind of goofy on purpose. I think there was like an intent of him looking like he can't act on purpose. That's the way that I saw it. Like he was
mission accomplished.
He was kind of in Bray Wyatt's world a little bit and kind of didn't know how to react to it. So he kind of was a bit over the top. I get what you're saying, but I think, he was literally being a member of the NWO, right? Like I don't know. I think there was kind of goofiness associated with it. And I think Cena kind of embraced that goofiness a little bit. But, point counterpoint.
Yeah, those two matches.
The Boneyard match I thought was fun. People loved it.
Drake,
let me ask you this, because people loved it, like universally loved it. Do you think people loved it so much because it was good, or did people love it so much because it was just different from these empty arena matches we've been seeing for the past month and a half?
Yeah, I think because it was something different, and it made The Undertaker look strong. It made him look like you remembered him 15 years ago. or when he's fighting Shawn Michaels, and you're like, man, this guy can go, because now he can't. What is he, a 53-year-old guy or whatever he is?
He's old as fuck.
Yeah, so that made him look strong. He got to keep his biker gear on. He wasn't laboring around looking like he did over in Saudi Arabia with Goldberg. So it made The Undertaker look great. He could do that match for another 5 years. And somebody could say, I'm going to beat you in the Boneyard this year or whatever. Those kind of gimmicks, you can prolong his career more so than bringing him to the ring and having him, beat somebody in 5 minutes.
Now, one of the things that we spoke about on our instant reaction show was, do you think that this would work in front of a live crowd? One of the things that was very unique was the fact that this was no crowd and everything was taped. You could have people sitting there for 20 minutes, watching this visual media. But if you have people in a stadium or an arena sitting there for 20 minutes or 25 minutes watching something, are they going to get bored and not want to take this? Even as good as something being slickly produced, are people at an actual WrestleMania going to want to watch this?
Well, I'm of the opinion that is the we've seen the end of one-day WrestleManias. WrestleMania going forward is going to be a 2-day event. I think they're going to find that they can sell it better this way. You can get or higher ticket prices, maybe even sell seats for both days. The advertising will be bigger. And then they can spin it as ratings and social media buzz because you're on for 2 days. I think there's no way they're going back to 1 day. The fatigue of an audience for 8 hours. I don't know if you guys were at the show at MetLife, but that was insane how long that was. So I think they're going to start going to 2-day events.
I mean, we're tired from just watching it.
Yeah.
I mean, usually I go to New York back home and I'll watch the shows, usually with Corey a lot of times, whatever. I'm exhausted from watching, especially if you're like drinking and whatever.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being at a WrestleMania. I would go to a 2-day WrestleMania. I would do that. I would never go for 1 day, 8 hours. It's no way.
I do think there is one thing that you have a problem with doing, a 2-day Mania. And I think it's a great idea, especially if it's like 3.5, 4 hours for each show. Is how do you go and tell somebody like 6 months in advance, all right, you're going to buy tickets for Saturday or Sunday, and you're not going to tell them, all right, you may get Roman Reigns or you may get, whoever the second Seth Rollins, but you don't know in advance who you're getting.
You're not going to WrestleMania to see Roman Reigns. You're going to WrestleMania to go to a fucking WrestleMania.
Yeah, you're going
you don't even know the card when these people coming from Ireland and Europe, they don't know the card when they get, like, I booked a trip to Italy, which got canceled, obviously. Like, I booked a trip to Italy in like January. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen or what wasn't going to happen. If I was thinking about WrestleMania months from now, you don't know the matches. And what you could do is sell it as a 2-day package and make even more money off
Absolutely.
of
it. You got to think, how many of those people go to Mania? They come in, they're doing Hall of Fame, NXT, hitting some of the ancillary shows that are around. Everybody has conventions. Then you're doing the Monday Night Raw after, which is always huge, and this year was awful. So I think people would stick around. I mean, you're doing it at a huge football stadium, but I don't know. I think
they're already making a weekend out of it. They're already going there making a weekend out of it, and usually they stay on Mondays. So it's like
I've been to 2 Manias myself, and I didn't go to the one at MetLife because my buddies, and now that we have jobs, we're looking at it like, oh my God, like what you said, I don't want to sit there for 9 hours and then I got to drive home afterwards from New York City at midnight or stay over. And it becomes a big thing. But yeah, if you're going to Mania, you're going because it's a whole weekend. And I just can't see them going back from it. I think that's going to be the one thing that comes from this mess of the coronavirus is WrestleMania is now a weekend. And who knows? You can put, because they got NXT now, you can mix that crap in and do whatever you want to do. And
I do think the one thing that is, and we'll move on from this in a second, but the one thing that is interesting, if it is 2 days, you're having a Saturday and Sunday WrestleMania. Friday's going to be SmackDown. So then when you're going to put NXT on Thursday, I guess on a Wednesday.
they could to me that's not hard. I mean, to me that's not hard to figure out. Like they could figure that out. You put SmackDown on Friday. Maybe you put NXT in, maybe NXT is not that weekend. Maybe NXT is the weekend before, and then you have 2 weekends back to back.
Right. I mean, you can do an NXT takeover whenever you want, and then just have the biggest stars on the show like they did now with, some of the women's matches had NXT superstars, and you could do it that way. And then the Hall of Fame, I don't know what they're going to do. You can move that to, if you want to do it Royal Rumble or whatever, you can do it whenever you want.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said,
you could do it at the Royal Rumble, say, hey, these are the people, and then during WrestleMania weekend, they actually come out and they celebrate them, and you make it a couple of months big deal.
Oh, and before I forget, we did not say this at the top of the show, but Brian Drake has a podcast, the Fantasy Football Hustle, which we're trying to get him to 1,000 subscribers minimum on YouTube. So you should definitely go and follow on YouTube the Fantasy Football Hustle, and also listen to him on iTunes and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. But what I would say, and I think Jay agreed with me, the best match on WrestleMania was most likely the NXT Women's match.
Absolutely.
So with that,
here we go.
We'll get into your deferred views on the match. But how do you think they're going to handle Charlotte now? Because she is a big star. She was on Raw giving an interview. We heard conflicting reports from PW Insider saying the reason they took a title off her was most likely because of visa issues. Then Rhea Ripley went and said, "I'm still in the country." So,
but I heard it was because they want her NXT for ratings.
Right. No.
That's 1,000%. The only reason you put that strap on Charlotte is because you want eyeballs on Wednesday nights versus AEW, because she's a name, and I will say, pound for pound, the best worker in the company. So why wouldn't you want her there?
Yes, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah. But the real issue becomes now, how do you get the belt off her eventually? Because she's going to have to put somebody over. And I think what they'll end up doing is they'll have some kind of 3 or 4 way where there's multiple women fighting for the belt. And then she could get taken out by someone, and then she is protected and doesn't have to actually take the pin.
But Drake, wouldn't it mean more if she lost to an NXT superstar? That's one of the things that we talked about in the lead up to WrestleMania. And it makes sense that they give her the title. Vince fucking loves Charlotte Flair, so he always puts her over.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of her losing to an Io Shirai, which we argued about, or whomever, Dakota Kai, Bianca Belair, I guess Bianca's on Raw now, but whatever NXT superstar you want to say,
great,
right? Doesn't that make them look even stronger than just winning the title? Winning the title and beating Charlotte Flair, the most over, next to Becky Lynch, the most over woman on the roster.
How many people, I'm sure we could look this up, how many people, Tapia, can you remember, have beaten Charlotte clean? That's not in a 3-way.
I mean, Charlotte's been a 10-time champion, and she's lost. So she's lost a lot. She has lost a lot. She's lost to Sasha a bunch. She's lost to Becky a bunch.
A lot of these two are 3-ways. They love putting the women in the 3-way matches.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's what they'll do is they'll find a way.
Other than the 3 horsewomen, I don't think she's lost to anybody, any other woman, really.
She lost clean right before, and it was terrible because Ember Moon got hurt basically right afterwards. But she lost clean to Ember Moon, and then Ember Moon destroyed her leg, and then which was basically the end of her push because she got hurt. But they basically that happened, and then, like I said, bye Ember Moon. She's been out with this, I think, a torn Achilles or whatever for almost a year now. But
it's very Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar like, where we're gonna, if we're gonna beat you, we're gonna beat you on a big stage.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the problem I have too, this is another topic, but Lesnar, if he loses, it's quick. Lesnar never has some big 5-star half-an-hour match. Like, that's over in 5 minutes. If that. When he lost to Rollins, it was done, here, boom, curb stomp, you're out, belts off you. We'll see you in 6 months. Same thing he just did with McIntyre. We'll see him again. But sticking with Charlotte, I think it'll be some kind of 3-4 way where then, say it's Rhea Ripley or whoever comes down, hits her with a chair, takes her out. She loses the belt. She extends her feud then with whoever took her out. And then this NXT guys, they're off to the races. And then she can elevate Ripley even more because, guys, you got to think, they brought 2 NXT women up to face main roster champions and both lost. Where do they go from there with those 2?
And I guess that's my thing too, right? Bianca Belair lost, and Rhea Ripley lost. So it's like, what do you do?
Shayna Baszler lost,
and Shayna Baszler lost, right? So it's like, what do they who are they going to put over? The other thing about Charlotte is what do they do with her in terms of is she booked like she's an NXT superstar? That their booking in NXT is completely different than the main roster. So is Vince McMahon booking these matches or is Triple H booking these matches? Who's in control of what happens with Charlotte moving forward? I think that's also kind of another interesting subplot of this too. Obviously, they gave Charlotte the belt. I'm sure she doesn't give a shit. She will lose just like her daddy used to lose all the time. I don't think she minds going over. I don't think she cares about that. But it's how do they do it? Io Shirai won the ladder match yesterday. So it's going to be her against Io Shirai, which I think could be a really, really fun match. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward with her.
And nobody knows who that girl is. They're not putting her over Charlotte without building her up. I mean, let's be honest.
Listen, here, Drake. Here's the thing: the main roster. If you're just watching Monday and Friday, sure, you don't know. If you are watching NXT, she is the most popular female on the roster in NXT.
I get that, but
Corey,
Vince doesn't care about that. Look at there's a laundry list of guys that they brought up from the main roster who were. You looked at guys in NXT, you're like, this guy's the greatest. Like he does amazing things. They get to the main roster and they're like, see ya.
I don't disagree with that, but the question is who's booking this? Like who's booking this shit? If it's Vince booking it, then you're right. If it's Triple H booking it, because they could have Charlotte lose the title and still be in NXT. Like she doesn't have to have the title to stay down there. She could say, hey, I'm down here because these are the best female wrestlers in the world, which they have the best female roster. And she could just stay down there too. So I don't think she needs the title to stay down there either. I think she'll have the title for a while, but.
Do you guys agree? I'm bored with the women's division at this moment. They need some new blood. It's literally, you kept the belt on Becky. You've kept the belt on Bailey, and now you've got Charlotte. She's great, but you have Charlotte. Like Alexa Bliss is now kind of lost in this tag team division. It's like you need some new blood because it's just kind of those main girls, and everybody else is so many rungs below them.
Yeah, there's the 4 horsewomen: Charlotte, Becky, Bailey, and Sasha, and then that's it. There's nobody who is close to them. They've done. We talked about this on the. What'd you say, Corey?
Not excited that Nia Jax is back.
I mean, she's terrible. Corey, we talked about that last week, right? That they have not built up any woman on the main roster other than the 4 horsewomen. Who have they built up?
It's true.
It's true. I mean, Alexa Bliss is a multi-time champ, but they seem like Vince would rather have her. Vince would die to have her back in the Trish Stratus era if they could get her doing, the bra and panties matches and things like that, because she looks like a Barbie doll. She's basically, when her character came in as fake Harley Quinn, and now she's kind of evolved from that. But she's kind of lost in the sauce too with just this tag division, which they don't really need.
And let's be honest here. I mean, and as much as we both love Io Shirai, what gives you the hope that when she comes up to if and when she comes up to the main roster, she doesn't get treated like Asuka?
1,000%.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that I agree with 100. She should just stay in NXT for her whole career.
Or Kairi Sane, or Nakamura after his initial run. Is there a common theme that I'm maybe saying here? Just saying.
Yeah. Vince did give Nakamura at least a little bit of a push at WrestleMania. They pushed him a little bit, and then they punted on him. But
yeah, let's get him to AEW already. Come on, what are we? Him and Cesaro. Let's stop wasting time. What are we doing?
But, it's hard. I mean, it's hard, man. These guys are getting a lot more money than they used to back when, back in the Attitude Era. Even like these guys are getting paid now.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, Nakamura might just say, fuck it. Keep paying me.
He likes to surf. So before we move on, last thing on this, how much do you think we'll see Charlotte on Raw with the NXT title? And personally, I don't know if that will be a bad thing, because if the NXT title is on Raw every week, because she is a Raw superstar apparently, that could help, bring notoriety to NXT. Yeah. So how do you think she'll be on Raw?
All the time, every week. They've got to get that belt over so that it means something. And she had a promo, I think after Mania, that said that, hey, the performer makes the belt doesn't make the performer.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, she'll be on there every week because she's the biggest female star they have. They have to get that division over. You have to make them want to tune in to NXT. And I saw you tweeted out the ratings there. I mean, there's over 1 million people watching wrestling on Wednesday nights between the two shows, which is a great thing. It sucks that it's split between two shows, but that's good for wrestling. That many eyeballs are on it on a Wednesday, and you don't get wrestling fatigue with Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If there's something on the weekends, the network, it's a lot of wrestling, man.
It's a lot. I mean, my wife is like, another night of wrestling, another fucking night of like she's pretty cool about it. She's fine. And a lot of times, like I'm watching wrestling on like my laptop, and she's watching whatever she's watching on the TV. But she's like, "Are you fucking watching wrestling again?" Like she just can't believe it's on every night. But I mean, now with the coronavirus, things have changed a little bit. But yeah, it's just it's crazy.
So I'm glad that I don't know how much cursing you're able to do on the fantasy football hustle, but I'm glad you're able to get a little bit out here, Brian. So
we actually used to swear all the time, and then my co-host Dwayne McFarland got hired by Football Guys, and then now he works for Evan Silva at Establish the Run.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
we just started. We got to the point where we were getting, like thousands of downloads a week, and we were kind of like, if we want to make money with this, and people are going to listen in their car or whatever, like we don't need to. If we do, we do, but we don't go out of our way to do it anymore, especially with some of our guests. But it doesn't matter, Like
I said, though, if you want to get any of it out, feel free.
Perfect.
But let's get into a second subject of the week. Everyone has their own opinion on if they should be wrestling at the moment or with the coronavirus, with the health effects. And we all know that all these companies are doing saying they're doing what they can in regards to testing people as they walk in if they have temperature. AEW has apparently 2 months worth of product in the can now, leading up to Double or Nothing. Las Vegas put out a tweet, one of their casinos, saying that there will be no events in Vegas until after May 31st. So Double or Nothing, if it's happening, it's not happening in the MGM. So we'll see what happens there. But both Impact Wrestling, yes, that still does exist. We'll be holding tapings over the next couple of days in Nashville. And the WWE, starting Friday, will be holding tapings over basically the next week in the Performance Center for Raw and SmackDown, and at Full Sail for NXT. Like I said, I'm not trying to get super political here, but it's very interesting that there's stay-at-homes, I believe, at least in Florida. I'm not sure about Nashville, but of Tennessee. But what's your guys' opinion on? I understand that you got advertisers and you got to go and put something on the air. But what's your guys' thoughts about continuing the taping, health of the guys, and everything here?
Drake, I just got one thing before Drake goes.
Sure.
It's not a surprise. It's down south. They don't give a fuck. Go ahead.
Well, you got to also go back to what have we been talking about in wrestling forever, that these guys are independent contractors. There's no union. What are they going to do? If Vince wants to run it as an entertainment show as it is, it's not a sport. I don't know. The state athletic commission in Florida obviously doesn't care. They could shut it down if they wanted to. But, if Vince wants to run it, he's going to put it out there. And obviously Roman Reigns said he doesn't want to do it. And he's a big enough star to say, I don't want to be here and actually mean it and not show up. But I don't know. I mean, if they want to come, and a lot of them live in that area anyways, but some of them don't, and they're flying in, just doing the shot, hitting the shows, and then going back. It's probably not an ideal scenario. And if somebody actually did catch it, I mean, Corey, you're in the Bronx. I mean, you're in a hotbed of it. You said there's numerous people in your building who've got the coronavirus. So it's
at the moment. Yeah,
it's not something to really take lightly. It's a serious issue. I don't know. I mean, they're a business, and they're kind of holding their employees' feet to the fire, saying we're going to do this and take it or leave it. Don't get paid and don't get on TV.
And I think that's kind of what happened with WrestleMania. Like you talked about how people were not excited. I guess the wrestlers were pissed. Like they did not want to wrestle. They thought they really did not agree with it. And Vince was one of the only people who were like, we have to keep this show going. But like you said, they don't have a union. And we've talked about this in wrestling for years, that there's no one to protect them. And just, unlike, the sports leagues, NBA, NHL, MLB, NFL. So it's like, hey, you can go out there and wrestle and don't get paid, or you can wrestle and get paid. What are you going to do? And so it's a tough spot for these guys to be in. It's a tough thing for me, right? Because I'm home all day, like you guys are. There's not a lot to do. There's no sports on anymore, which is terrible, obviously. So there's not really a lot going on. How many times can I watch Ozark? You know what I'm saying? So it's
my wife's dying to get me to watch that show.
Drake, it's awesome. It's
maybe I'll give it a shot.
No, it's like a Breaking Bad to me.
Never watched an episode of that.
Oh, really? Breaking Bad's great. See, you got Breaking Bad. You got plenty of stuff to watch.
Second best show of our generation is
yes.
Breaking Bad, besides The Wire.
I like silly comedies like Big Mouth. Big Mouth to me is the greatest show on television.
Wow.
Big Mouth is great. It is great, but
that's what I love. Just degenerate, sick cartoon pornography.
You gotta check out Paradise PD. It's pretty good too. On
Paradise PD.
Yeah, I heard Yucko the Clown is one of the producers of that, right?
I did not know
Stern
that.
Show. Yeah, he's one of the creators.
Oh my.
So there's not a lot of live things to watch. Even down to production was halted on Hollywood TV shows. So down the road, there's going to be shows that we're not going to be able to see that we're normally accustomed to seeing. So this is the one form of quote unquote live entertainment. So this is a way for these guys to really, really make some money. Vince to make some hay, even Impact. And I don't even watch Impact, but it's like, maybe I'll start watching now. So, and it's something for me as someone to watch. So I have a real hard time. I don't think it's fair to the guys. Apparently they're sanitizing the ring after every match, and they're the WWE anyway is really going out of their way.
Like that matters. You got a guy in a headlock or whatever. He's right here sweating all over you. But
yeah, you got coronavirus. I mean, absolutely. They're taking the temperatures of everyone, but it's still what's going to happen is a couple people are going to get it, and then that's going to be it. And then they're just going to have to stop everything.
Let me ask you guys. I'm sure you follow this more than I do. How have the numbers been for the shows during the virus? Have they spiked, or are they still doing nothing?
At the very beginning, Raw and SmackDown were up, and then they slowly went down. I mean, the post Raw was up by like 6 or 7%. SmackDown is, I think, kind of leveled to a decent number for what
Raw had one of their worst weeks of all time, like 2 weeks ago.
I mean,
wow.
And NXT and AEW have both cratered. I mean, this past week, AEW actually lost for the first time in 2 months, and they only lost by 1,000 viewers.
I can't wait for the 8 weeks podcast about
the 8 weeks. AEW had, I think they had 900,000, 950,000 viewers in January, and this week they had 650.
Yeah, and everybody's home.
And everybody, I think people are just freaked out. They're watching the news. They're watching Netflix. They're watching Amazon Prime. I don't know. And I do want to ask you, Drake, about your views on the Performance Center shows, because you kind of mentioned it a little bit. I know we're taking a lot of your time. So
they're a waste of time. Like, I get, where's AEW filming? That's not the Jag Stadium, is it?
It's right next to the Jag Stadium, the Daly's place. So it's in Jacksonville.
Oh, okay.
First couple were in there, and this last week and the one going forward are at Georgia at one of the residents, QT Marshall's gym. So those are where these last set of tapings are going to be at.
AEW's, I'll give them credit though. That looks 1,000 times better than Performance Center. It's outside. They got the set. Vince actually ended up turning the hard cam, which was a smart move. The Performance Center shows are junk. You could put on, like we said before we went on the air, I would much rather they just show classic, pay-per-views, classic Raws from the Stone Cold era. I think more people would watch a, Attitude Era Raw that you could just see right now on the network if you wanted to, but who's going to find it? Than watching the crap they're putting on with these job matches. You have the Raw after WrestleMania, and you've got freaking squash matches. You're supposed to be having guys coming out, this is my big reveal and my comeback and all these new superstars. And you got job matches? Like, this is what I'm watching? Like, the hell with that. That's why so many guys now, they just DVR Raw and they just fast forward through it. Like, what's the point of watching it live? There's no reason to sit there for 3 hours.
You know what, though? I don't disagree with you, but I do like that a little bit with the job matches. It does remind me a little bit back when we were kids, like, you know, the Superstars and some of the like Saturday's Main Event, you know, where you.
Yeah, but Corey, all the matches are job matches, basically. I mean that Raw on Monday was awful. It was a really, really. The problem is, I don't mind a squash match. I don't want to see a 27-minute squash match. The Aleister Black Apollo Crews, it was a squash match that went 27 minutes.
Oh my God.
So I didn't watch the whole match, but I would, like, you know, you watch a match and you're like, oh, this match is going to be a squash match. So let me fast.
Are there more than 4 guys on Raw, by the way? Anytime I turn it on, the only thing you get is Aleister Black, Ricochet, and the Street Profits. That's the only guys on the show. Nobody else exists. I don't know what women are on the show. I don't even know who the champ is on the show. Like, now and this, maybe shame on me. When did the Universal champ get off Raw?
That was post. They had the draft, and that's when the Fiend beat Rollins in Saudi Arabia, and he went over. And then Brock went and left SmackDown to come to Raw or something.
Oh, okay.
I'm
like, when the hell did this happen?
Yeah, basically Fox wanted Bray Wyatt. So they took him. And then Lesnar went to Raw, basically.
How awful is that? I know this is well before WrestleMania. So Wyatt loses the championship to Goldberg, of all people. And then there's not even a follow-up. It's just, now I'm on this John Cena program. Like, what? Yeah, you just lost the belt and nobody cares?
I mean, we talked about this on the podcast a while ago. Kofi Kingston lost the title in 9 seconds, and he hasn't fucking mentioned it at all. Like, he hasn't talked about it at all, that he lost the title in 9 seconds.
He was the main event of WrestleMania last year. He's in some weird tag team 3-man match this year, and he lost to John Morrison. Like, dude, you were the main event. You won the strap last year.
You do know what's about to happen, Jason, right?
What?
Ryan's bringing back his wrestling podcast. I think we fired him up. Oh boy!
I mean, I get it. There's peaks and valleys. Here's my thoughts too on for WrestleMania with Drew McIntyre. Everyone loves the WrestleMania build. They love Daniel Bryan going up. They loved Kofi Kingston going up. Now it's Drew McIntyre. You know, you win the Rumble, that guy's going over. You saw the 24/7s and all the stuff. Everybody in America knew he was winning that match. But then I think he is such a bland character where once we get back into arenas and people are like, all right, I can go back to the show again. It's like, oh, wait, here's Drew McIntyre. And we can be like, oh, this guy, like, okay, here's British Roman Reigns. Like, you know, there's nothing special about Drew McIntyre to put him over and say, this guy's the champion.
So I agree with you and disagree with you. I don't think Drew McIntyre is a great babyface. I don't. I really don't.
And during this run, they turned him into a babyface.
Yeah, to go against Lesnar.
Yeah, you're right.
In NXT, I don't think he was great, to be honest with you. When he was a heel, I think is when he's at his best. I really do. Like, he's kicking people's ass. He's telling people what time it is. I think he's a little ill-suited for this role, but it's the role he's in, and it gave him the belt. So we'll see if they can turn him into, like, the nice guy that everybody likes before the audience turns on him, which we know is going to happen, like they turn on everybody. But they have to not make him too corny, like they did with Rollins. So Rollins really was firing all cylinders, and the audience loved him. And then he started to really get goofy with some stuff. They started doing some goofy stuff with him. That Bray Wyatt thing was horrible. And then the audience completely turned on him. Then they turned Rollins heel, and he's been good as a heel. Mm-hmm. It's got to be how they book him. I think they can keep him strong as a babyface and the audience liking him, but they can't make him come off too goofy and too much like a cornball, or the audience will absolutely turn on him.
What the fuck was that Big Show thing at the end of Raw?
Well, Drake, they said the beginning of Raw, we have a big surprise coming up at the end. We're going
to plug a Big Show's Netflix show. That's what we're doing. Like, when he came out, I'm like, what is this nonsense? Like, this is what the guy's in the ring for some odd reason after beating Lesnar, comes back out. Then the Big Show, as soon as his music, I'm like, you got to be kidding me with this.
Well, the best part is all day on Ariel Helwani's show and a bunch of other shows, you have Drew McIntyre showing the title that saying he won at WrestleMania. All these interviews, not even, showing the title saying, hey, he didn't want to even touch the title until Mania was over. So anyone who's watched anything knows that he's already won this match by the end of the night. Mm-hmm. So you've already told everybody who cares anything about your product that he's won. So, it's like maybe you don't have him, do these interviews until Tuesday after if you know that you're putting this as part as your goddamn product, besides the fact it's the fucking Big Show.
Big Show. How's that guy still around? Nobody. I mean, you got a guy who's, what is he? Probably 6'10" in real life. Because McIntyre looks big next to him. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how misbooked has this guy been when you got a guy who's near 7 foot, 300 pounds, and nobody cares? Nobody cares if this guy comes out. Like, I'd rather see name some NXT guy. I'd rather see them over the Big Show.
I thought you were going to say Jinder Mahal. No.
Sure. Bring him too.
Heath Slater, 3MB, three-way for the title. No.
David Arquette back in the house.
Hey, he's doing some indie shots apparently. Saw him on NWA a couple of weeks ago. But let's do our last topic for this week. And once again, I'm thrilled to have Drake Fantasy on with us. Brian Drake giving us a little bit of time this week.
And Drake, before we go, I definitely want to ask you about your show. Like, I want to ask you about how long you've been doing it. We can talk a little fantasy, whatever.
Cool.
So we've been talking for the last 2 weeks, third week of season 2 of Beyond the Ring. First week of the show, the Benoit tragedy was one of the best 2 hours I've seen of television all year.
It's a really sick thing to say, Corey.
Well, I did a show with you for a couple of months. So I have a warped sense of humor. And you had New Jack, which was interesting. And then this week you had the Brawl for All. Mm-hmm. All of us were, I guess, mostly at Oswego or just about to be in Oswego in college together at this point. So we might have actually all been watching wrestling maybe around the same time together. Initial thoughts of the documentary. I thought it was really well done. Week 1 of season 2, but I thought it was one of those really good things. And I don't know what your guys' take was, but the Russo Cornette stuff always interests me. But I'm glad that wasn't the sole focus. But I thought the Brawl for All stuff was really interesting. But the stuff, dealing with Dr. Steve Williams stuff was super interesting. And all the stuff that, the injuries. And there was so many things that with the draws, I thought it was a great hour of television.
Yeah. I'll give you my first thoughts on they've done a great job on that show. And it's even better production this year. I love Jericho narrating it too. First episode with Guerrero and Benoit. My wife's up there and I just have it on. She doesn't like watching it. And then Eddie Guerrero dies. And that's the part of the show. And I go, that's the best thing that happens in this show. She's like, what do you mean? I go, trust me, it gets way worse than that.
Oh, yeah.
And then I told her what happened. She's like, yeah, I'm not watching this. But great episode. The second one, New Jack should be in fucking prison. That guy's a scumbag. Like, what a maniac, dude. All the stuff he's done. How is this guy? Number one, not been shot. And I don't know. He's just a bad person. How he's still getting booked. But and the one, the Brawl for All, getting back to watching it now, yes, it was a terrible idea. I love that they got Bart Gunn on there to talk about it. And Russo just wanted to see JBL get beat up. That made me love Vince Russo. I don't care about Russo, this way or that way, but I share his vehement hatred for JBL, who I think, as he said, is a bully and a prick and someone who just like pushes his weight around. So seeing him get knocked out was absolutely the best part of that hour.
Yeah, but you share the haircut as him. I thought you would have a kinship now.
What's that?
But you have a similar haircut to him. I thought you'd share the.
No, I hate JBL. I don't like that he's a bully. And any show you listen to, if you listen to any like Conrad Thompson shows and they tell JBL stories and Pritchard's, his boy, so he's always blowing him. but people just have bad things to say about JBL because he's a dick.
Yeah. The one thing is, so the whole Brawl for All was a rib on JBL. I mean, it's unbelievable that they risked all these guys' careers. I mean, basically Steve Williams' career was done after that. They risked these guys' health and careers for a rib on JBL. Like it's unbelievable to me. The Cornette Russo stuff, I don't care because we know that they hate each other. Like, I don't care about that stuff. The guys' individual stories, like Bart Gunn's story, I thought was fascinating because I didn't remember all that about him back in the day, and how they really screwed him. Like, they really screwed him. They touched on the Droz thing, which you could have that be a documentary really all by itself with him and D'Lo. But the Bart Gunn thing was just really, really, really compelling. And the Dr. Death stuff was really good too. It was great. I liked that a lot better than the New Jack one. We talked about the New Jack one. Thought it was a little abbreviated, whatever. But I really enjoyed this one. Definitely the Benoit one was incredible. And it's funny, Drake, you were talking about like your wife watching it a little bit. Like my wife watched it and watches wrestling with me occasionally, but isn't really into it. She was like enthralled with it. Like, she didn't know anything about any of these people. We just had it up and we were watching it, and she's like, "Holy shit!" And she wanted to watch part 2 with me, and she's like, "This is fucked up," you know. Yeah, it's been some really good television. I think this season's been better than last season, if that's possible.
It's close. I mean, I thought some of those episodes from season 1, like the Von Erichs, I thought was a really good episode. Gio Hernandez, I thought was a really good episode. So I mean, I don't disagree with you. It's been a great season. I thought, some of the stuff that the conversations of the different ideas of Russo and Cornette, and just the different ideas of how these people, the different generations, think about what wrestling is. And I don't usually agree with many things that Russo says, because I think Russo is just a parody of himself at this point. I think Cornette is also a parody of himself. I think Cornette is basically the ultimate troll when it comes to like AEW.
They're basically two old wrestling people in wrestling who are still trying to put themselves over. So to me, like, I don't know. Like, I don't really give a shit about those guys, but go ahead.
But the idea of the fact is the Jerry Springer type of, who knows what could happen any moment of just people coming out and just fighting each other. That was the boom period of, just anything could happen. That's when we, us 40-year-old men now, two with actual, futures with families, me just sitting there, trying to figure out what I'm going to do, if the coronavirus is going to kill me or not, people in my building. But, that's when we, we're super into it. I mean, we're into it still because, it is what it is. But, Russo, was a dog who needed to be put on a leash. And once he was off that leash, we saw what happened, for his time in WCW. It was a disaster. But, he wasn't terrible for the business.
I think the thing in whether it's wrestling, whether it's football, we see it like with, we're going to talk fantasy in a little bit, but like Warren Sharp, who's I think one of the greatest minds in football right now. We always need different people, different thinkers in society and life and politics, right? We always need different thinkers, different people who are outside the box. And I think Russo was that, right? Wrestling was Jim Cornette and Bruce Pritchard and Vince McMahon, and this is what you're supposed to do every time. And that's why Vince Russo's thing works so well, because he was so out of the box. Now, there's that fine line between being out of the box and successful and then totally floundering, which he eventually did. But, I mean, he ended up getting another job with TNA. So he did have a lot of success, right? So
how long was he in WWE for? 18 months as the head writer? I mean, he wasn't there very long. That star didn't burn bright forever. I mean, he's also aided by The Rock and Stone Cold. If they didn't have The Rock and Stone Cold during that period, nobody remembers Vince Russo. But
I think I agree with you 100%. But I think he maybe allowed The Rock and Stone Cold to be them. I don't want to say be themselves, but maybe be themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that was also maybe he
opened Vince up to get away from the 80s lame character into a more realistic character that we see today. I'll say he made Vince open his eyes and bridge from this old antiquated type of wrestling into kind of what we see today.
So
they still have that today. You see the Viking Raiders. I tweet about it every week. The worst gimmick in wrestling is the Viking fucking Raiders.
And that's a Vince thing.
Yes,
right? They
terrible.
were called War Machine in another company, and then they changed their name to the War Raiders, which was kind of goofy, but whatever. And then they went to Raw, and Vince changed it to the Viking Raiders and changed their name to Ivar, and like
they were Viking Experience for a week or two.
And then that people were so bad. So it's like there still is that aspect of it.
Yeah,
I think Heyman's was helping Vince a little bit with stuff, but now with the coronavirus and whatever, we don't, things have changed a little bit. I hopefully, and I know the story's been told a lot, so I know they're trying to do documentaries on different things. I eventually would love for them to do this. I mean, there's so many stories they can still do to tell the story of Vince Russo and the WWE and all the things that happened there. And they've touched on it a little bit, but I would love for them to do a bigger deep dive into it, because a lot of people are taking claim of this Attitude Era. Triple H was taking claim, and Shawn Michaels was taking claim. Vince Russo's taking claim. So I would like to see a really, really good long form documentary on the Attitude Era.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good things that they can do. I mean, next week they'll be doing Jimmy Snuka. They've got Owen Hart. They've got.
I mean, he killed someone. He killed a person.
Yeah. So, like, before we move on, what's your interest level in next week's episode with Jimmy Snuka and the death of this woman that he killed and apparently got away with for a very long time?
Is it sad to say little to none? Like, I was never a Jimmy Snuka fan. I didn't get it. The jumping off the cage and all that stuff. But I don't know. That's kind of one where I'm sure I'll watch it. I'll just have it on DVR. But the Owen Hart one, because I actually watched Owen Hart, when we were growing up. So that's more interesting to me. But I don't know. I have no interest in this Jimmy Snuka one.
Yeah, I'm more interested because I heard the stories and I don't know. Again, I'm saying he killed someone. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Oh, no, he definitely did.
No, he did. He definitely did.
Yeah. So, right. But I'm interested in the story about what happened, how it was found out, all the kind of details behind it.
How it covered up for years and years.
Yeah. How whatever. So I want to hear the details of that for sure.
Drake, it's like I said, it's been really cool having you on this week. So let's get a little bit into what you've been doing. So, like,
sure.
Many people don't know the reason that we had you on is because the first wrestling radio show experience that me and Jason kind of had. I mean, like, we did little things together when we were in Westchester Community College together, but both of us were on your show back in the day at Oswego State. So let's talk about that and what you're doing now.
Yeah, that show, Off the Ropes, got started. I was a freshman at Oswego in 1998, and I go to the radio station and I'm getting into sports broadcasting, and there's a lot of guys ahead of you on the list to do play-by-play for basketball and hockey and all that stuff, so I knew I'm not going to be able to do this as a freshman. I'm not going to be able to broadcast those games, but I can do some sports talk, and wrestling was as hot as a pistol at that point. And they're like, hey, we want to put on a show to capitalize on this and just talk about wrestling. And I'm like, I'll sign up for that. Like, let me go. So the first few shows, it's like nothing like what it evolved into. And I was kind of the only constant. And there was just random guys that would come in and be like, oh yeah, I like wrestling too. And I kind of weeded them out, and it became kind of my show. And it was every Tuesday night at 10 o'clock was Off the Ropes. There was a show before called the Sports Zone, which is like your general, kids talking NFL, whatever, which is probably awful. And then at the end, I became the sports director of the radio station my senior year, and I made sure to keep Off the Ropes, just basically an hour of me talking to my friends. But I'll say this, we got real wrestlers on the show. We had guys like the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. We had Animal. We had Tatanka. We went to an ECW pay-per-view and got guys to come on there. I still have the photos of us talking to Little Guido and C.W. Anderson and some other guys. Funny story, Rob Van Dam, we go over to talk to him, and he goes, hey, man, I got to get paid. You got to give me like a bag of weed or something. I'm not a pot guy. And I'm like, bag of weed? Like, they pat you down when you come in. What do you mean bag of weed? He's like, sorry, man, got to get paid. But yeah, we had some legit guys, and I'll still never forget one of the guys, Corey the King, and he just didn't care. So we have $1 Million Man on the show. He's now this devout Christian, and he goes, I got to ask him a question. And I know what he's going to say to him. It's going to be something bad. And I'm like, all right, just wait till the end. Let me interview this guy first and then ask him whatever. So we get to the end of the interview, and he goes, excuse me, Ted. Now, you're a big religious guy, right? And I already know where this is going. He goes, do you think it's fair that if I die tomorrow and I go to hell, I go to the same hell as Hitler? And, Hitler killed all these people, and I'm just, watching porn at my house here in Oswego, and I'm just like, oh my God, what are we doing to the $1 Million Man? Like, Ted, thanks a lot for coming on the show, buddy. We'll see you next time. But so yeah, I did that show. That was a great time, and I thank all you guys for coming on over the years and helping make that show as fun as it was. And God knows we didn't talk any wrestling the last year, but we did go to Wrestlemania. When it was in the Sky Dome, we went to a Thunder. We went to ECW shows. One of the guys on the show, Sean Conway, actually became a writer's assistant for the WWE, and now he's a writer doing TV shows, which is awesome. And it's led me now to where I am doing a fantasy football podcast called the Fantasy Football Hustle. Myself and Dwayne McFarland, my co-host, he writes for a site called EstablishTheRun.com, which is run by Evan Silva. If you've heard of him in the fantasy industry. Wrestling and fantasy football have a lot of parallels. It's a lot of the same guys who enjoy wrestling also enjoy fantasy football. So it's a real easy crossover to me to find that same audience. And hopefully we'll promote this show, and guys who follow me will come follow you guys and vice versa. So we're doing great things there. And I'm working for a site called fightingchancefantasy.com. I'm kind of helping these guys grow. And it's really a site where I always say I have this catchphrase for it now, and as we kind of relaunch things, it's Fighting Chance Fantasy, where fantasy's future is written. So we kind of want to take guys who need an opportunity, and we're sort of the NXT of fantasy writing. So if you want to talk baseball, you want to talk football, hockey, MMA, whatever is your niche, like we just want to get you a platform to talk about it, and then you can go off and work for Fantasy Alarm, like the guy who founded the site did, or Dwayne now working for Football Guys and Establish the Run. So it can happen. I talk to guys and they're like, hey, I want to get paid to write about fantasy football. I go, well, there's maybe 100 guys in the whole country who get paid to write about fantasy football. And, they can easily find somebody to do it for nothing. So I'm not saying work for free, but I use the old Vince McMahon analogy when anybody asks me about writing for the company, and I go, I don't pay you, I give you opportunity. And if you want an opportunity to write and take it as far as your eyes can carry you, and if you've got imagination, this is your playground. So that's kind of my pitch with fightingchancefantasy.com. And it's been great, man. With this podcast, we've had shows last year with a couple of thousand views. We're getting on YouTube now, and the reason we want to grow YouTube is because you can actually make money there. Nobody cares about the podcast. It's impossible to make money on a podcast unless you're Conrad Thompson. But how'd you get involved in a fantasy? Obviously, we're all fantasy football people here. How'd you get involved in the fantasy podcast world in general? What got you involved? How'd you start growing your podcast? I got into it. The guy Ryan Hallam, who started Fighting Chance, who now works for Fantasy Alarm, I was kind of just talking to him on Twitter, following him, and I follow guys just like anybody. You follow Matthew Berry and like I said, Warren Sharp, and we actually just had Rich Rebar, who works with Warren Sharp, on our show last night, and he needed a guy for a mock draft. So he tweets out, he's like, "Hey man, somebody bailed. I need a guy for a mock draft at like 8:00." And I just went, like, I'll do it. I'm just sitting here doing nothing. So I did the mock draft, did a little write up for him afterwards, and he's like, "Oh, that's great. Like, where do you work?" And I go, I don't do this. Like, I'm a fan. And he's like, wow, do you want to do it? So I got into it with him, and being a radio guy, it's like, I want to do podcasting. I don't want to just write. I'd love to talk about fantasy weekly. And I went out and bought a MacBook, and I bought, nice equipment, and hooked up with Dwayne. I saw him on Twitter. He had 200 followers. He's putting out all these charts and this real nerdy content that was way over my head. And I'm like, dude, who do you work for? He's like, nobody. And I'm like, you want to come on the show with me? I'm nobody too. So we started out with 200 followers for Dwayne. He's got like 15,000 now, and he gets paid pretty well to write weekly columns for Establish the Run. And we've had, from Sigmund Bloom to Matt Waldman, Evan Silva, Rich Rebar, John Daigle from Roto World was on the show 2-3 weeks ago. Big time guys come on. We've got more. Joe Dolan from Fantasy Guru. Well, he used to be Fantasy Guru. He's got a new site that's going to be coming out. You hear him on Sirius XM. He's going to be coming on the show soon to promote it. So it's a blast, man. Every week we're blown away. Like, how do we get, Sigmund Bloom and Evan Silva to come on and do the show when we used to just do it in the basement and nobody was listening? I mean, that's why my advice to anybody who gets into podcasting is no one's going to listen. And that's fine. That's cool. Grow the show as long as you're having fun with it and you kind of promote here and there. If you got good content, people will start coming along, and keep it interesting and don't sound like everybody else, have a different angle. And that's cool. That's the way you got to break in, I guess, in this industry is just be real. Don't be a copy of somebody else. Just try to just be you. And if people catch on to it, then God bless you. You'll be one of the 100 guys making a few bucks in this industry.
All right. Last thing for me, let's say the football season starts, no injuries, whatever. Mm-hmm. Who is your number one overall pick next year? Okay, let's take Christian McCaffrey out of it. Other than McCaffrey, who is your number one pick? And who do you think will be the best rookie next year?
I mean, it's tough to go wrong with Barkley. It's tough to go wrong with Zeke Elliott, Dalvin Cook. They're all in offenses that are geared to get them the football. So especially if you're in a PPR league, I like any of those guys. I hate the Cowboys, but I'm a Zeke Elliott fan for fantasy because he's not sharing the football. He's going to get all the touches at the goal line, and he's on a good team with a good offensive line. So they're going to pound the rock in the second half. So I love Zeke. I love Dalvin Cook. I've been on him for years. Now he's finally starting to stay healthy. I just took him 4th overall in a best ball league that I'm drafting. I'm currently on the clock. I'm getting messages like, asshole, make a pick. It's been like 4 hours. Love those guys. Rookie wise, I'm going to say this. This is the year of all the great rookie wide receivers. These guys are going to struggle out of the gate because there's no OTAs. There's no rookie camp, no mini camp. They're going to come back in basically July, August, whenever we hope, and get thrown onto the field. And some of these guys are not good route runners. They're just, the college game is let's get the ball in space to guys against zone coverage. So, they're not going to be ready to go. The running backs, I think, are going to be a bigger advantage because say they get drafted to a kind of a prime spot like Tampa Bay or Kansas City, I think could take a running back where these guys are going to come in and I think they're going to have a better opportunity. They're all kind of tweeners though. We talked about this on the show last night. They're not big power backs. There are a lot of guys who are they look like wide receivers, almost playing short wide receivers playing running back. They're very in the Miles Sanders role where you're 5'10", barely 200 pounds. So you're not a grinder by any means. So
I think that's almost where the running back position, and not to get too deep into the woods, I almost think to a certain extent, like that's where the running back position is going. You know what I mean? Like that kind of McCaffrey, even Dalvin Cook. He's not some big monster guy. I like J.K. Dobbins. That's my guy. Mm-hmm. I think he's really good catching the ball out of the backfield. He's a good runner. I think out of the rookie running backs, assuming he gets put in a good position, he's going to do pretty well as a rookie.
Yeah, I think the kid out of LSU too. Was it Edwards-Helaire? Who's going to be a guy probably goes in the 2nd, 3rd round. If he lands in a good spot, if he goes to Tampa Bay, I think someone's going to go to Tampa and take over. There's no way Ronald Jones is going to be the guy in Tampa Bay. That's not happening. They're not. Tom Brady's not rolling with him. I wouldn't be surprised if they take on a guy like Devonta Freeman, who they know can win in pass protection because you don't want to get Brady killed with a rookie back there. Because you got Brady on a 2-year window. That's it. He's only playing there really for 2 years. So can't get him killed, but you need somebody who's legit, who can go catch the ball and grind out. And Ronald Jones isn't that guy.
Besides asking you, where you should pick Nick Chubb.
I love Nick Chubb, man. I took him in the 1st round last year. I took him at the end of the 1st round.
But for someone who's just starting fantasy football, and you can try and make this one, for the idiots out there, what would you say the best format is to start if you're just starting?
Well, I was at an event with Mike Clay last year from ESPN, name drop, and I asked him, I go, why are all your rankings about 8-team leagues? And he goes, ESPN's most popular league is an 8-team league.
Oh,
and I was blown away. I'm like, you can't get 2 or 4 more friends, but that's why everything there is geared towards 8-team leagues. I would say get 10 to 12 guys, half point PPR, kind of splitting the difference. Don't go non-PPR. That's real boring. Full point PPR, I think you can get taken advantage of by guys who know a little more about the pass catching running backs, but half points, great. Keep it simple. And my theory on drafting is like this: draft a running back, then draft another running back. When you think about drafting another position, draft another running back, because you can never have enough running backs. The wide receiver position, to me, there's so many great receivers now. Every team has 2 or 3 really legit wideouts. That kind of alpha wide receiver it's kind of going by the wayside almost.
Yeah.
You still have Julio, but he never scores. DeAndre Hopkins now with his new team, he's great. But even the Odell Beckhams of the world, he's fallen off a cliff.
Who?
Exactly. I wouldn't be shocked if they traded him still before the draft.
It's an interesting idea, but this is all the great content you will hear every week on the Fantasy Football Hustle with Brian Drake. Brian, it was great catching up with you again. Anytime you have anything to promote or just want to come on and curse at me and Jason, because you can't do that anymore on your highbrow fantasy show, the door is always open to come on. And I saw that last night you were talking to a guy from the Worksheet. This week today you were on the Worksheet Wrestling podcast. It was always great having you on, and it was great catching up with you. So if one time you want to just quickly promote your podcast, your Twitter, and everything else, and of course everyone go to YouTube, get them to 1,000 subscribers, and once again, the floor is yours, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, on Twitter at Drake Fantasy. At FC Fantasy Sports is Fighting Chance Fantasy. The show is the FF Hustle. We're on Instagram, Facebook. Put in Fantasy Football Hustle. Basically anywhere you'll find us. YouTube, iTunes, all that good stuff. Yeah, we had Rich Rebar on last night. He works with Warren Sharp. He was on Roto World before that. Real smart guy. But thanks, guys. I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I look forward to coming back and talking about wrestling. It's good to bounce these things off other people because Lord knows my wife's not watching.
And we still have to talk about Charlotte Flair being the best worker in the company. We can save that because trust me, we're not going to have many shows probably after the next couple of weeks here because I think eventually they're going to stop. They're going to have to stop these shows. I think the coronavirus thing is going to really go for a while. But anyway, we'll have you on again for sure. Thanks for coming on, Drake.
Jason, if you want to quickly let people know how they can follow us on Twitter and before we call it a day.
Sure. We are at Worked Shoot Pod. Check us out on Facebook at the Worked Shoot Wrestling Podcast. We're on YouTube, Corey. I'll let you talk about the YouTube. But yeah, we're on Stitcher. We're on iTunes. We're on Spotify. Don't say the word. Don't type in the Worked Shoot Wrestling Podcast. You will not find us. We are Worked Shoot Wrestling Podcast.
Very cool. And of course, you could also check out other podcasts that I am on. You Don't Know Jackie, which Jason Brooks was part of this past week.
That was a good episode. Everyone check that out. You Don't Know Jackie. Make sure you put the apostrophe in the you don't. Don't just type don't. You won't get it.
And Brian, if you want to go laugh and not feel bad for me, you'll truly enjoy that because it's an hour plus of just me getting roasted, but Jason does quite well, and I'm sure I deserve it. But Jason, as you do every week, let's final words.
I think we're done here. See ya.